For over a century, people have analyzed every little detail of the Titanic disaster. Yet, despite decades of research, there are still shocking facts and hidden truths that most of us have never heard. What if we told you that a camera was discovered deep in the ocean, revealing haunting photographs of the Titanic as you've never seen before? Come with us as we discover these never-before-seen photos and relive the tragic events that occurred before, during, and after the ill-fated sinking of the ship. To get the full picture of this narrative, we have to turn back the pages to where it all began. It was a chilly, foggy morning, March 31, 1909, a dream took root in Belfast, Ireland. On this day, the foundation of the first steel plates was laid for what would become the most legendary and doomed ship in maritime history, the RMS Titanic. It wasn't the day that a ship was born. It was the construction of the greatest movable entity ever crafted by human hands. An engineering wonder, designed to dominate the seas and leave the planet in amazement. The gargantuan endeavor was pioneered by Harland and Wolff, a prestigious shipbuilding company. Their talented workers invested everything they had, heart, soul, and state-of-the-art craftsmanship, into constructing the Titanic. But she wasn't by herself. The Titanic was one of the 3 Olympic-class liners, followed by the RMS Olympic and the HMHS Britannic. They were all gigantic. They were all tragic. But only the Titanic captured the imagination of the world, before she ever set sail. Since day one, she was surrounded by intrigue. Papers couldn't get enough of her. People thronged just to glimpse her rising deck. She was a floating palace in progress, built to remake opulence and size. No one could possibly have thought that her maiden trip would be her final one. The White Star Line, the firm that owned the Titanic, was flying high. Its earnings were robust. Its standing unblemished. With the Titanic still on the drawing boards, all looked rosy. But they couldn't imagine the very ship designed to etch their reputation in history would almost ruin it. Now, the surviving photographs of its construction seem like the whispers of a forgotten dream, giant steel skeletons, scaffolding spiderwebs, and little men that were dwarfed by the gargantuan size of the ship. The Titanic was not just any ship. She was a fortress, a masterpiece, a behemoth. She was 882 feet and 9 inches from stem to stern and stood 104 feet from keel to bridge. She was approximately the length of 3 football fields. Her cost of construction? More than £3 million, about £310 million today. She wasn't the largest, she was among the most costly enterprises of her era. Ambition, however, comes at a price. Over the course of the 2-year building of the ship, 8 men died in a series of mysterious accidents. Some thought a dark cloud had already descended upon the Titanic before she ever reached open sea. March 31, 1912, just 3 years since work had begun, was when the Titanic was finally finished. The world marveled. But unwittingly, they were also watching the start of a disaster that would reverberate through time. It was, in every respect, the period of silence before the storm. After all the years of waiting, that special day had finally come. April 10, 1912, the Titanic loomed majestically on the docks in Southampton, England. Towering above and sparkling in the morning sun, she was getting ready to make her great debut before a crowd of over 100,000 spectators, locals, tourists, and reporters included. It seemed like the whole world had congregated to watch history unfold. But what everybody doesn't realize is that Titanic had already fallen into the water days before. On April 2, she took a low-key trip from Belfast to Southampton, a technical shakedown cruise to make sure everything was functioning correctly before the big show. And now, the real journey was about to start. Her final destination: New York City. She would transport more than 2,000 passengers, among them some of the richest and most powerful individuals on the planet. The itinerary was exact: Southampton to Cherbourg, France, then Queenstown, Ireland, before crossing the Atlantic. The return would be the reverse, the same route, through New York, Plymouth, Cherbourg, and home. But there had been a problem few were aware of. Britain was facing a coal crisis. A nationwide strike had left vessels fighting for fuel. The Titanic could not receive a fresh supply. Coal was being scrounged from other White Star Line vessels instead. Even though the strike had ended by departure, it had come too late for a full resupply. The Titanic would travel on borrowed coal, and borrowed time. Now, let's examine the figures. Titanic had permission to take on board a maximum of 3,547 individuals. They had 905 in first class, 564 in second class, and 1,134 in third. The divide between the classes was enormous. A ticket in first class to New York cost $2,500, at today's values, that's about $57,000. The most expensive suites cost more than $103,000 today. A third-class ticket, meanwhile, was only $40, about $900 today. Steerage families tended to be separated by sex because of the ship's design. And with just 2 bathtubs for over 700 third-class travelers, luxury was a precious commodity. Behind the scenes, the Titanic functioned as a small city. 5 giant kitchens, manned by 60 chefs and assistants, made everything from roasts to pastries. Even a kosher chef was on hand for Jewish passengers. 944 people worked to keep the ship going. Some of them would be remembered not only for their service, but for their heroism when disaster hit. But the forewarning started early. When Titanic departed Southampton, her enormous hull created so much suction that it pulled the SS New York loose from its moorings. The little ship swung around to Titanic, almost crashing into it before the journey had even started. Sudden action avoided a disaster, but many would later ask themselves, was it a sign? Photos taken on that day feature smiling commuters, waving crowds, and beaming officers. Those pictures now seem like time capsules, snapshots just before the world was altered. But at the very heart of the ship, something sinister was already fermenting. Hard to believe, but the Titanic was already aflame when she set sail. For 10 days before her initial voyage, there had been a fire raging in one of her coal bunkers. It wasn't some small flame, it was a full-blown blaze that might have sunk the ship before she ever hit the Atlantic. The fire had damaged the ship's inner framework. Although some experts argue that it wasn't the immediate cause of her sinking, there's no doubt it made the Titanic vulnerable. The fire burned for days, warming the hull from the inside. And chillingly, it was never extinguished completely. Reporter Senan Malani went on to reveal pictures of a 30-foot black streak on the hull of the ship, proof of fire damage. More sinister. This same part of the vessel is the area where the iceberg will hit. Had the steel already been weakened? In spite of learning about the fire, authorities decided to set sail anyway. Arrogance? Misunderstanding? Or just blind confidence in what was meant to be an unsinkable vessel? April 14, 1912. The evening the Titanic fell to its doom. The vessel was steaming through waters with icebergs, unaware, or maybe not caring, that disaster loomed before it. The Doomsday Iceberg was supposedly from the Jakobshavn Glacier in Greenland, which broke off between 1910 or 1911 and sailed south with the currents. Several ships alerted Titanic to ice fields in the vicinity. La Touraine did so on April 12, the first of them. Then the Rappahannock, which itself had been damaged by ice, arrived. On the same day that Titanic sank, Titanic was warned yet again, from the Caronia and the Norden, both warning the ship about icebergs in front of it. Captain Smith received the messages but continued on, apparently unmoved. Additional warnings arrived. They were also ignored. Then the collision occurred. More than 1,500 lives were lost. A recovered old underwater camera years later held ghostly pictures of the iceberg, perhaps the one itself. Seaman W. Wood, captain of the SS Estonian, had sighted and photographed a huge iceberg just before the accident, even recording the coordinates. Astonishingly, they correspond to where Titanic would hit. One of those who survived was San Francisco banker and politician Dr. Washington Dodge. He boarded with his wife and son. His panicky, Handwritten testimony, later retrieved, provides one of the first and most descriptive accounts of that evening. At 11:40 p.m., Dodge and his wife were awoken by the collision. The danger was minimized by the crew, but when life jackets were handed out, reality set in. Dodge put his wife and son on Lifeboat 3 in the freezing deck. He remained behind. He saw lifeboats being sent off half full. The "women and children first" policy, though admirable, also resulted in many men being abandoned. Fifth Officer Lowe, who directed the launches, had still more perils. Turbulent bursts of seawater from the condenser pumps crashed against the lifeboats, risking capsizing them. Thanks to a swift response, the boats survived. Dr. Dodge's testimony tells not only of the physical devastation of the Titanic. It tells of leadership collapse, communications breakdown, and the price paid for human hubris. Added to a newly discovered underwater photograph, drowning passengers of every class and creed clinging to debris in the water, his testimony brings the past to life. The Titanic was not only a tragedy, more than that, it was a struggle between man and nature, between pride and modesty. And despite all the unanswered questions, about the fire, the iceberg, the lifeboats, haunting photos and witness accounts assist us in reconstructing the facts.